So Munster arrived in Cape Town yesterday. Malachi Fektawa, Conor Murray, Calvin Nash, RG Snyman all passed fit. Obviously, you mentioned Munster came through against Leinster in very dramatic fashion. The Stormers beat Connacht, as we know, 43-25 in their semi-final without having much possession or territory, but they were pretty devastating with the ball that they did have. Munster did beat the Stormers 26-24 a couple of weeks ago with a late Stormers try, so it wasn't quite as tense as that scoreline would suggest. And it was, I don't know if you remember at this stage, Keith, sorry, a lot of rugby over the last couple of weeks, but fiery exchange as well. Joseph Deweba and Peter O'Mahony got into a bit of an exchange, and then beautifully it is Joseph Deweba who was captured on video saying we're going to F them up when the result came through from Dublin a few weeks ago. So listen, I can't sell this anymore for you.
Yeah, look, it's we wouldn't have believed that Munster were going to be in this position, and I'm never a huge fan of semi-finals and final at the end of a league. My view always was the team that's at the top of it wins it, but them's the rules, and Munster can enjoy it, and I can enjoy it for this weekend. I think Munster are back to full strength, pretty much. So are Stormers. It'll be interesting to see what team is put out there. I thought Craig Casey was very, very good last week, the week before last. Now Conor Murray is back in the fold. What would you do? What
would you do? Because post
Conor was there the last time.
Yeah,
Conor was there the last time in the Stormers and did very well. So I'm not going to say it. I don't mind which one. I am going to say that because I think they've different skill sets and different things that are required. And they are very complementary, actually, to each other, and depending on who you're playing against. So I don't know what way it's going to go, and you never know when they're down there as to how exactly fully fit or not they are. So I'm not sure, but when I look at it from where, and we talked about the bitter card or the the underdog card that Raj would have had and uses with aplomb. I think Munster can look at it this year in the exact same fashion. So having struggled really heavily for the first few weeks, having done very well, and having then struggled again laterally, to then eke out the victories that they needed to get to be in the position to just get there for the URC, to get into a position to then beat Leinster to get to here. It's how much emotion was taken up by winning last week, and I think they have a great opportunity because they know in their head this is a team we've beaten here before, and that's a big thing, and it's a final.
Such was the emotion at full time at the Aviva Stadium, Fiona, in the semi-final. I think if it had been a week turnaround, you would have given Munster next to no chance. Whereas now they've had 2 weeks to watch the "we're going to F you up" video on loop, to have a few days rest, to really think about it, to fly down comfortably on the Tuesday. That really brings them right back into it. But it's still a massive ask, and the word is that of the 55,000 in the stadium, there's some talk of 5,000 Munster fans expected, which is pretty good going under any circumstances, but it's still going to be very much a home game, very difficult on several fronts. Are you expecting similar contest to what we saw a few weeks back in terms of how the game will go? Like, how did the Stormers go about their business on the big days?
Yeah, you see, the thing about the Stormers is we know, like, they're really good up front. Their scrum is brilliant. They're the thing about them is the line out is definitely somewhere where Munster can attack, especially Peter O'Mahony, Dweba, Throne. If they've Snyman in there, he'll put massive pressure under that throw if they're bringing them back into the squad. So although their scrum is solid, I think that the line out is definitely something Munster will have a target at. And the thing about the Stormers is, they were clinical at times against Connacht. We talked about possession, but they have the ability to go wide. They like to to go off the cuff, and they'll move that ball and they'll ship it really wide. But if Munster can bring that defence that they brought against Leinster, so we saw that kind of rush and the decision making at times, and the week before as well was excellent. Feketau has been having some serious games, and decision making, his reading has been really good and has improved massively. So I'd expect to see him back in the starting lineout. But if they can get them to play that off the cuff rugby, and I think they'll catch him out wide at the breakdown. And we saw Munster do that at times against the Stormers the last time. They'll target the right breakdowns, but I feel like if they play around with the ball and they're not in their system and their big guys aren't on the ball, that they can be vulnerable out wide, definitely at ruck time, I think. And I feel like Munster will attack that area. But they've got such great players, and Herschel Yankees and Evan Roos didn't play that last game against Munster, and they're two huge players. I'm a big fan of Yankees. I think he's brilliant, and he's kind of a mixture of Murray and Casey. He's got that ability to move the ball really sharply, but he's a clever little rugby player as well, and his kicking game isn't too bad. So, and we know what Evan Roos can bring. We saw him last year, probably not his best season because he had a couple of injuries that knocked him out at times, but he's been playing well. He played well against Connacht again, I thought. So they have some players to add in the mix, but Munster have no fear going down there. They've gone over, they've won, they've beat the Stormers over there, they've beaten the Stormers in Thomond Park. It's a final, there's the pressure of a final, but I feel like it's a different type of pressure. There isn't a lot on Munster. They can go out and enjoy their rugby and play the way and play the style they have been playing. Yeah,
it's funny because Jean Klein was talking, and he was rejecting any suggestion that Munster are in bonus territory, or we don't just exist to beat Leinster, was the kind of interesting quote. But there must be a pressure when they look around and they see Keith Earls and they see O'Mahony and they're conscious of 2011 and they're not in finals all that often. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. By the way, that win in Cape Town, that is the only time the Stormers have been beaten in Cape Town since December 2021. We probably underestimated just how rare that win was, and not to turn you into some kind of sociologist, Keith, but I just the other night happened to be, I don't read about South Africa all that often, there's so much going on in the world, but on the BBC a headline caught my eye where an ANC spokesman was talking about how South Africa could become a failed state, and that at the moment the hardship there is really incredible. They're having power cuts known as load shedding of up to 10 hours a day, and the economic situation is just absolutely dire. They have an unemployment rate of 33%. 1 in 2 young South Africans are unemployed, 60% below the poverty line. Sport assumes an extra resonance and importance, I think, at times like that. Some of the tickets have been sold for €3-4 in a bid to fill the stadium. So in so much as how it affects what happens between the white lines, that's very debatable, but it's worth just noting that is the atmosphere Munster are heading into at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the €3-4 cost is a little bit of a red herring in that just the exchange rate is gone, so they would always have different pricing ranges to fill those stadia, always had. So some of the more expensive tickets, they wouldn't be expensive by European standards, but when you put the exchange rate to it, they would. I love the fact they filled the ground out, and if there's 5,000 Munster fans there, that's pretty phenomenal too. I think like sport, often there's a backdrop to sport at different times, and that can be a big emotional element. But I imagine that both teams will not be taking the view in terms of that. So from the Stormers side, I think they'd be really upset that Munster had beaten them there 3 weeks ago. They ruined that record that they've had for nearly 20 months. That's a big deal, or whatever it is, 2.5 years. That's a big deal for them. Munster would be saying, well, we know we can beat them. We're not going to get caught into anything else that's happening down there. I think there may be disruptions during the week because of those blackouts for the electricity. They're going to have to deal with that. It is the end of a long season. It's the third trip down there in not very long. It's been a pretty extraordinary period of time. Everything when you're playing away from home, it's stacked against you.
Yeah.
And what we saw just on the days gone by, that if you read any of the English papers over the last few weeks, there was a criticism of Leinster's route to the final, irrespective of the fact that this is a destination that was named years in advance. Irrespective of the fact that Leinster had deserved to be there for all the different slots because of their performance during the year. But it was almost like a preordained view that Leinster were going to romp home and win at home. Leinster have never won at home. They've won their 4 European Cups away from home, which is interesting. But winning at home is a downside easier. And Leinster losing at the weekend to La Rochelle opens up another chink, that it may not be a foregone conclusion. So Munster are going to try and take that to the bank. Stormers are going to try and say, no, this is our citadel. There's nobody going to get in there now.
Fiona, if we just as we approach the very end of the season, chart the difference in Munster from those early weeks to where they were in Dublin a week ago, it really is night and day. I mean, my memory of that opening month or two, really right up to the South African win, is of dropped balls as they tried to implement this new style, a confusion over running lines, criticism of their fitness. Leamy seems like the defence seems to be getting better week on week on week. I mean, even like the performance against the Sharks in Europe was very disappointing way to exit Europe. And we did talk about and that it hasn't gone away, their weakness in the scrum or the front row, the lack of depth there. And that is still something to flag ahead of the final. But like in broad terms, even if they hadn't beaten Leinster, I found myself during the game thinking, this season is a success.
Yeah, and that's it. Like at the start of the season, the coaching staff asked for patience. Prendergast coming in, Leamy. They're going to be implementing different systems, especially the first few games. I mean, no one wants to watch knock-ons. It's not the prettiest of rugby, especially when you're inside in the 22 attacking. You expect the players to be more clinical, and sometimes you blame the skill set of the players when in fact they're just learning how to implement those systems that have been freshly put on them. And the more they go about that throughout the season, I suppose its confidence, Joe, is huge in them, and the more they go about that, the more confident they are in where they're meant to be and the shape they're meant to have. And I suppose you can't take away, I suppose form as well, individual form. I thought Calvin Nash is someone who's really stepped up to the plate and put his hand up. John Hodnett has had some monster performances, and then you're kind of looking outside that and you're looking at the Carberry Crowley situation. I just thought Crowley has really settled the ship, and unfortunately with Healy going away, but they've just in that knockout rugby games, their partnership and how they're interlinking, and we know Healy started the last game, but to be able to bring Healy off the bench and him playing to the capacity that he has been playing in those games is a confidence thing, and the coaching staff really has to be complimented on that, because these players have just, when we thought they weren't even going to qualify for Champions Cup rugby, and now to be in a final and qualify for Champions Cup rugby, but also to be able to they had the best defence, and we talked about their defence at times, but it's their attack. Their launch plays off set piece is really good as well, and that's what's exciting to watch. And the players offloading, they're backing themselves in those offloads. So I think it's a confidence that has been built throughout the season. At the start, you might think it will never happen, but it just goes to show you that if you can back a player, a system, a coaching staff, and give them that time, that it will eventually grow.
There you go. That was but a taste of the full rugby conversation. As usual, you can get the full chat wherever you get your podcast. It's waiting for you right now.